Salatina. Johnny Yasi, Ken is on Musty Norsi. Dunita Natai si, Drinik, Becanas Tesi. Nortenach an yet Dunik and Night I don't see a sea, Salatina. A pause skill. Thank you for the introduction. I am a Dane. Dane means people of the land, but I'm also more so a Dane Soltine, the real people. The language describes everything that we are. Denechania is a big word. Denechania, the term, is a description of our civilization, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically. It has everything. It's important that when we speak in our language, that we speak from that perspective. We use a word in the English language, we say elders. But for us, in our language, we say altnede. Altnede means the grand knowledge keeper. This word nede, like when we say shet nede, the mountains, the grand mountains. When we say this nede, the grand river. When we say tenenede, a lot of people together, it's the grand. So it took me a while to accept this word ofnede, because descriptively it means you live a high order. It means having sobriety. It means having, I don't gamble. Living a clean life, both spiritually and instructing my children, and especially my grandchildren. This, what I'm to talk about, as I get there, I live out in the bush. I live out in the country. The big river, this Nede, flows by me. I live in a place where there's buffalo. It's your Nede Nate, the grand buffaloes. I harvest buffaloes. I'm taught by my parents to do that. At an early age, now I'm in a time of my life where I'm enjoying the grandchildren. I have 11 of them. 6 boys, 5 granddaughters. Beautiful children. And these say Setsia, grandfather. Or sometime they will use the Cree word Bushum, which is all right. But guess what happened 41, 42 years ago? I met a Mohawk woman. Now, they're way in the east, Ontario. I never realized that this woman would take over my life. If you people know Mohawks, anyway, my wife is a registered Western traditional midwife. And she's been delivering all the children in the north. I don't know how many she's delivered, but I do remember the first time when she delivered a child in the hospital. And I asked her, "Whose baby did you deliver?" And she looked at me straight in the face. She said, "You mind your own business." I never asked again. This woman, this Mohawk wife, she's retired. May 13th, I think it was a Friday. But she turns to me in the morning and she elbows me. "Husband, guess what? Today I officially retire." I said, "Good." And then she turned to me and she said, "From here on, my husband, I'm going to devote my life to you." "Good," I said. And to this day, nothing is going on. So I'm still waiting. I grew up in a time that was interesting. In the 60s, in the late 60s. At the beginning, I thought I was a hippie Indian. '69, 1969, the white paper came about. I was 19 years old in the north. All this talk about government wanting to do away with our treaties, our Indian identity, so on and so on. There was a huge, huge debate. And that was the beginning of the chiefs organizing in the north, the Indian Brotherhood. They started in Fort Smith area. I remember at 19 I was going to these meetings because my father was a chief. His father was a chief as far back as we could remember. So it was in my blood to go to these meetings. I did that at the age of 21. Now, just before I go there, I was an architect draftsman. I planned homes, buildings, shit houses. Then, in the spring, I became a chief. And I wasn't even in the community. I was traveling on an assignment. And there was this young child, that a boy walked into this band hall of this community, and he had a piece of paper in his hand, and he walks and he brings that paper to me, and I looked at it. It said, "Francois, you are now the chief of the Fitz-Smith Indian Band. Come home." Whoa. Talking about life changer, that did exactly that. And the elders at the time didn't need it, they kept things in order. And that was the beginning of my young leadership. I spoke the language. I was a good bushman. Also, a little bit of education. I finished high school. That was the beginning. So after this debate of '69 white paper, there was a consortium of businesses all over Canada, the States, that wanted to build the largest gas pipeline to go through our lands in the Northwest Territory. And our people, I was part of these 16 chiefs. We talked about this day and night. What are we to do? Do you have the money? Do you want to build a pipeline through our lands, Dene lands? What are we to do? This debate went on through the nights. And we concluded in 1972, 50 years ago, that we are going to take the government of Canada to court. And that was the beginning of the caveat, the Paulette case. The chiefs that were there at the time, without doubt, without question, we were to protect the lands for our grandchildren yet to be born. How are we going to do this? We had a couple of non-Dene lawyers. They were kind of naive about the treaties, Treaty 8, Treaty 11. I come from Treaty 8. But more so, the chiefs, the elders that witnessed the treaties firsthand were the ones that were going to tell the governments that the Treaty 8 and 11 The surrender clause, extinguishment clause, was not what we talked about. So, because in our language we don't have a word for surrender, so the elders were quite, and the chiefs were quite adamant that our people never talked about land or surrender lands. And also, in the north, Treaty 8, Treaty 11, the white people once in a while take out the treaty where the X was written. And all of the X's were all the same. So somebody else did that. It wasn't our people. So, in 72, we filed a caveat. Caveat, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm a bush lawyer. Said, well, the caveat simply means that we had a prior interest to all of these lands. Over 450,000 square miles of land. Why are we going to give that up? So we filed the caveat in the Supreme Court. In the beginning of our people's oral history that witnessed the treaties began to speak up. William Justice Morrow, the judge, traveled our communities. And when I say travel there, he sat in tents, no lights, in homes where there was no electricity, and began to hear out the elders and the chiefs. It was a remarkable timing that we needed to do this. Because what was at stake was the land, the water. It was fundamentally important. The elders, because our language, as I said, is distinct. You cannot, the white language cannot interpret a word. This machine is dying. Can you still hear me? Good. So, in the spring of 72, when we filed a caveat, there were non-Denny people thought we were crazy. We were going to lose this court case. They wrote about it in the newspaper. We talk about racism. It was clear then. that genocide was still happening and that they were going to take our land no matter what, and sometimes with the help of the church. The elders that were at the original signing spoke up, and they spoke in their language. They were translated, and there was this community in the north, and you know, the customs of the legal system is strange because, well, they all dress in black robes. You go to the court, they're in black robes. There was this elder sitting in the back that was being questioned. He can't see too good, and he can't hear too good. And these lawyers from the government were questioning him about history. Finally, this elder got pissed off, and he stopped, and he said to the translator, he says, "Who are those priests that are questioning me?" Wonderful. I went to university briefly. I've had many confrontations by non-Denny that want to get into a physical confrontation. And I wasn't afraid, no fear, because I'm a man from the bush. I had many battles on the street because I was still drinking at the time. I'm a recovering alcoholic, 47 years. I remember this professor at the University of Lethbridge, political scientist, teacher, says, "Are you the Paulette?" I said, "Yes." "The caveat, you're going to lose the case," he said. I said, "You want to bet?" He didn't want to bet. That fall, 1973, the ruling came down, and it was in our favor. One of the biggest judgment, a clear judgment about title lands, Aboriginal rights, and so on. He had Justice Morrow had 6 articles and recommendations that why he ruled in our favor. Anyway, that fall I came back to class one day. I walked in, all the students stood up and clapped for me. And I told the professor, you better listen to the Indian people. That was a change, a major change in the government's policy of how they dealt with First Nations. At the same time, there was the Nishka case in BC that came down, ruled in their favor. The Paulette case is there. The history is there, though the government, in an appeal through technicality, we lost. But they didn't question the rights that we had. I just want to read a couple of the conclusion of the judge. One, he says, I am satisfied that those who signed the caveat present-day descendants of those distinct Indian groups who organize in societies and using the land as their forefathers had done for centuries, have since time memorial used the land embraced by the caveat as theirs. That was. Two, I am satisfied that those same indigenous people, as mentioned in one above, are prima facie owners of the lands covered by the caveat, that they have what is known as Aboriginal rights. So, the question of surrender, extinguishment, was thrown out the window. This caveat, the Paulette case, that is better known today, there were 16 chiefs, and I'm the only living one now. I think about those chiefs. That gave us the door to our grandchildren to stand up for our rights, our dinachania, our harvesting rights. By the way, when I speak, I don't use certain terms, and one of them is trapping. I use the word harvest. Trapping is a colonial term used when the Hudson Bay came here, began to colonize our people. Today, it is important that the leadership, the chiefs in particular, need to stand up for their forefathers that entered treaties, the number treaties, Treaty 8, Treaty 11. They are powerful. The treaties are paramount. The treaty supersedes any acts. The Parks Act, NWT Act, and any acts that come forth. It's powerful. Like prayer is powerful. In my homeland where I live, this Nede, these two companies came in the 80s to obstruct the river. They wanted to build a dam so they can electrify wherever they wanted to bring the electricity to. They came back not too long ago, ATCO, wanted to engage in damming that river. And we always argued treaty, first and forefront. We always talk about the Paulette case. It's important. And both times, ATCO, the other component, walked away. They know that they could not flood our lands. They couldn't flood our spiritual places. There is archaeological sites dating back 8,000 years. We could not allow them to flood those lands. Because treaty is paramount. My son is now the chief. He has not only studied his father, but he's educated, both traditional and Western way. It'll be hard to get by him, because he supports and will defend the treaties. So when we talk about water, water is a blessing, is a medicine, is everything that we need to live by. But that water is being polluted. And it's been mentioned today, the tar sands. The now scientists, doctors, are seeing that plastic is being airborne. Plastic. In the north, we have the highest respiratory problems, issues. We have a lot of people dying of cancer. Didn't discriminate, young, old. And we need to protect the waters. The First Nation I belong to, Smith Landing, we do a lot of research in the bush, on the fish, on the animals. We do that about 3 times a year, these camps, because we must do that. So we can find what is happening to our four-leggeds, to the fish. Things are changing. Climate change is here, and it isn't going to go away. I am guided not just by my elders, but I'm guided by what was foretold, the prophecies. I think about that. I share those stories with my grandchildren. So I take them in a bus, because it's important. Water is life, and we need to protect it. We need the chiefs. We need the chiefs to come out and stand up for water. I have traveled other parts of the world. They can only do so much. But here, the power is in our hands. I was to say that I'm going to go back to my wife. I talk about her because I love her. Not too long ago, my wife attended a student reunion. And I went there with her. And different students that she was the only Indian there, I think. And the rest were non-Dene. And there was this non-Dene young guy always looking at me. Anyway, he finally went up to my wife, Leslie. Leslie, is that the Francois Paulette? And my wife says, yeah. You know, he says, I thought this man would be fossilized by now. Make a reference to the Paulette case. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I wanted to the work that you are doing here is valuable. Because the grandfather water, the trees, the air, they are listening to you. They know what is being said. The grandfathers that guide me, that guide you, whether you're Dene or non-Dene, you have spiritual guides, and they're with you all the time. And they feed you information. And we are gifted in all different kinds of ways. And continue that path. Continue that path of just not reconciliation, but if you're going to reconcile, you also have to reconcile. The non-Dene have to reconcile with Mother Earth because she's been abused. Not only me. My final word is that when I was 19 traveling, I'm going to say I was a hippie Indian then. I was traveling with these other people, First Nations, and an elder, and there was a non-Dene hippie amongst us. And he asks the grandfather, not in a religious way, but he asks the grandfather, "Grandfather, what is the biggest sin that man can do?" The elder quickly said, "The biggest sin that man can do is to abuse Mother Earth." And I still listen to those words today. So, my friend Salotina, thank you